Welcome back. It's AFEX time now, and we notice slight changes on the AFEX activity chart for the week ended 19th of September. We have Chinwe Lemoha from our Abuja studio now to give us details of it. Hi, Chinwe. Good morning.
Hi, Ini. Good morning.
Okay, so how did the market go? We saw that things hardly moved.
Of course, generally there was an increase in the volume of transactions traded and the value of transactions traded on the exchange. So the total value of transactions traded on the exchange, which is equivalent to the total turnover, increased by a factor of 3.33% from 0.12 to close the week at 0.40%. In the same vein, the total volume of 379,315 contracts were exchanged in 209 deals recorded in the week's trading. The ACI, which is the AFEX Commodities Index, remained unchanged at the end of the trading session. AEI, which is the AFEX Export Index, declined by 0.56%. On the volume of transactions traded on the exchange, paddy rice was the most active, with an increase from 293,743 to 641,052 contracts. Maize showed significant improvements from 34,000 to over 600,000. Likewise, sesame increased from 30,000 to 115,000 contracts, while sorghum moved slightly and closed the week at 26,264 contracts. Across the commodities traded, paddy rice was an apparent winner and increased by a factor of 0.89%, closing the week at 279 naira per kilogram, while every other commodity traded maintained status quo, closing the week at the prices for last week. This is by and large what happened on the exchange over the course of the week. For more information, kindly visit our website at africaexchange.com and follow us on social media at AFEX Nigeria and Comex by AFEX. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chinwe, for that analysis of the market's activity. Thanks a lot. Well, we're still staying with AFEX now, but we're talking about bold actions for resilient food systems. And when we talk about that, what comes to mind is grow, nourish, and reward. That is what AFEX would like to look at in this at this time. Well, bold actions for resilient food system is the main purpose of the AGRF for 2022. The largest gathering of agricultural stakeholders to help Africa grow the coordinated and large-scale action by stakeholders. Remember, we talked about that program. We had our correspondent, Ayola Kasim, there, and we had a lot of inputs from there. But now we want to look at it from the perspective of AFEX. And it's good to have Michael Martins, joining us after a while. Hi, Michael. Good morning. Good to have you.
Hi, Ine. Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So AFEX is interested in AGRF under the theme Grow, Nourish, Reward, Bold Actions for Resilient Food System. What do you believe the key... we do have a lot of challenges facing the food system in Africa, especially at this time with the war in Russia, inflation and everything. But what are those key ones that you see?
Thank you very much, Ini, for that question. And I think in light of the theme, for the AGI Summit in 2022, I think this is, incredibly important to discuss. Just to give a sense of how important, agriculture is to the African continent itself. Of the population in Africa today, about 60% of that population are smallholder farmers. And if you look at agriculture in terms of contribution to the gross domestic product, agriculture currently contributes about 23%, almost a quarter, to the GDP of the continent itself. So it's safe to say that agriculture is a key, important element of the economy. In terms of the broad range of different challenges and problems that are facing, the Africa food system, they can be broadly categorized into three. The first one is access to market. There's a saying by smallholder farmers in South America, which says, market is the best fertilizer. Essentially, what they're saying is, don't give me money, don't even give me inputs, give me market, give me a market where I can sell, give me a market where I can sell my commodities. And why that is incredibly important is because, that allows for the transfer of value, to the average smallholder farmer, right? Because the average smallholder farmer is poor, is very often, faced with having to sell off, the volume that he cultivates incredibly early, so that a lot of the value that gains over the, the period of cultivation doesn't necessarily transfer back to the, to the smallholder farmer. So having access to market is incredibly important for the average smallholder farmer. The second problem that I think is also important to touch on will be the problem of productivity. That is, how do you increase the average yield of the smallholder farmer within the African continent? Today, as it currently stands, the average smallholder farmer is about 3 to 4, even 5 times, less productive than his counterpart, let's say, in Europe and North America. So that's another key problem that, of course, needs, addressing in terms of us even looking at the continent, from a food production perspective. And the last but certainly not least would be, access to infrastructure, right? So as at today, there's about a 15%, food loss for most of the, cereal and grain production within the African continent, and that could very well have been, avoided if we only had the necessary infrastructure in terms of storage and logistics, available on the continent. So those 3 problems: access to market, access to infrastructure, and then also access to, capital. Those would be the top 3 problems that I think, we tried addressing during the summit, and I think is also important for the continent.
Yeah, well, the issue of storage and preservation speaks a whole volume, because about 50%, especially like in Nigeria, post of our harvest is lost. The post-harvest losses, so it's actually a big problem. So in the light of this, what actionable strategies does AFEX see to curb some of these major challenges?
So generally speaking, I think it's safe to say in terms of short-term, actionable strategies, I think the most important thing would be the entire ecosystem needs massive investments, right? So in terms of access to, let's say, capital in the form of inputs and fertilizers and seeds, first off, we need, significant, massive investment in research and development to help improve, the quality of seeds that come out from our research institutions, so that can help increase, the volume of our production on a year-on-year basis. As at today, Africa would need to increase its hybridization rates, by 6 times just to measure up, with what the global standard is. And in terms of even fertilizer application itself, Africa would need to increase their fertilizer application by 8 times, just to get to what the global, standard currently is. In terms of access to infrastructure, as at today, if you look at the way, the nature of the commodities market within the African continent, most of that cultivation itself is seasonal. So there needs to be, massive investment in irrigation so that we can produce all year round. According to a McKinsey study, Africa would need about $65 billion, in irrigation just to increase, our production volume on a year-on-year basis. And even beyond that, we do need massive investment in storage, as I've mentioned earlier, but not just any type of storage, right? So if you look at the Nigerian, agricultural food landscape today, there's a claim that we have 1.6 million tons of storage, but most of that storage is not near, farmer locations, which is essentially what is needed in order to prevent that post-harvest loss. So there needs to be either a redirection in terms of, the type of investment that we're making in storage, to help prevent more, post-harvest loss. As of today, it's at 15% for cereals and grains. At AFEX, that number has been significantly reduced to only about 1 to 2%. In terms of access to market, I think what we are doing in AFEX currently today is incredibly important in terms of the exchange infrastructure, helping to facilitate trade, between the smallholder farmer and the processor. And what that does significantly today is that it removes all the middlemen, the traders and the merchants, that essentially increase, quote unquote, the value of the commodity for the end buyer. So if you can connect those 2 parts of the market, both the sell side, the smallholder farmer, and the buy side of the market, you can essentially transfer more value between those 2 participants, which is what, primarily the exchange does. And I think also technology would also be important to mention in terms of providing access to market, because as at today, what we are able to do on the exchange is we're able to structure different financial products that will encourage, the infusion of capital into the commodities landscape. Historically, access to, capital has been incredibly difficult for the commodities ecosystem, historically less than 5% from commercial banks. As at today, due to the type of financial products that we're able to design on the exchange, there is an influx of a whole lot more capital into the system. So those top three things I think are some of the, short-term actionable strategies that we can leverage on in order to, increase our agricultural production volume as a continent.
Yeah, it sounds like AFEX is already working on systems or ways to create inclusive and sustainable, resilient food system on the continent.
Absolutely, 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 absolutely. And we can go on and on about, the work that we have done. As at today, we've provided inputs to more than 200,000 smallholder farmers. Out of that, we have almost 500,000 smallholder farmers, on our system alone. In terms of access to capital, we've, spoken at different points in time with regards to the number of inputs and fertilizers that we've given, to smallholder farmers, and even also the amount of money that we've been able to raise from the capital market. I think as at today, we will be bordering on, $100 million in terms of capital raised, that is being transferred, between the different participants on the exchange. And that's an incredible sum of money considering that, historically, funding to the agricultural sector has been less than 5%. And even at that, most of that funding still, tends to come from, let's say, the federal government or even some other public institution like the Ministry of Agriculture. In terms of access to market, we do provide that exchange infrastructure, like I mentioned before. But what we are also trying to do today is trying to, empower other small and medium-scale agricultural entrepreneurs so that they can provide the same solutions, to, either to the smallholder farmers on the sell side or even to processors. And as of today, we are, for all intents and purposes, the largest provider of storage as a service in the country. So it's safe to say that, across these different thematic problem areas, AFEX has been providing solutions, and we will obviously continue to provide solutions across those areas.
All right, Michael, thank you so much for that, and we wish AFEX the very best.
Thank you very much, Ini.
Let's take a breather, and then we'll be back to the markets.